Hi, welcome back to Genesis Custom Sabers. This is going to be an advanced tutorial showing how to take a basic Ascend stunt saber without sound and turn it into one of these, a highly upgraded Ascend stunt saber with a LED engine, flash on clash, and a power level indicator. If you're a new sabersmith, you may be able to learn something along the way. Okay, this is just going to be a rundown of all the parts and bits and bobs that are necessary to do the upgrade that I'm attempting to do on the Ascend stunt saber. Of course, I'm assuming by now you've watched the disassembly tutorial, and you'll notice that all the parts are taken apart because it comes apart very easily. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be upgrading this saber to a Petit Crouton 2.0. So I've got the Petit Crouton right here. I'm going to be adding a twin 18500 lithium-ion battery pack available at the Custom Saber shop. And I've got a kill key here, probably not the one I'll be using, but this is one that's available at the Custom Saber shop because you'll need a kill key to go in the 2.1mm recharge port. You can get these also at the Custom Saber shop. Now I use Switchcraft brand. They're more expensive, but these never fail on me. Really happy with these. I'm going to be using zap straps, really small ones, similar to these. You can probably get these at the Home Depot. I'm going to be using, this is a Molex KK connector for the speaker wire. It's just a twin connector. You can get a similar version of something like that at the Custom Saber shop. You may even be able to cheat and use the half of the connector from the battery, which we are going to be cutting off on this upgrade. A little bit of hose. I think this is just standard dishwasher or hookup hose. Some rubber hose is really rigid. This is pretty soft and pliable, which I like. We're going to be cutting off sections of this. I think I have just enough to do the job. Of course, this is a speaker holder, machine speaker holder from the Custom Saber shop. You need a 5/64 Allen key, and this is 3M automotive tape. I believe the number on this tape is 06384. 06384. Now this doesn't have to be the tape that you use, but this is just a nice, really durable, really sticky, double-sided adhesive, and we're going to use that for a couple of different things in this. Of course, you're also going to need a glue gun and a really decent soldering iron. I've got a soldering station there. Of course, I'm going to be adding in an auxiliary switch. This is it's just a standard button that comes with the Custom Saber shop. I'll link to all the parts used in this video in the description, so you'll be able to go right to the Custom Saber shop and see what parts were involved. This is just a tactile momentary button. We're going to shave down that plunger because it's pretty long. If you disassemble your Ascend saber, you will have a switch. The main switch is a slide switch. It looks a lot like that. That'll have come out of your saber. Odds and ends, you're going to need wiring, different color wiring, and this is a power level indicator that I've purchased at the Custom Saber shop, and this power level indicator is set up for a 7.4, well actually it says 7.2 volt, it's adjustable, but I'm using it with a 7.4 volt lithium ion pack. Try to see if this fits. I'm not even really entirely sure that it's going to fit and do what I want, but we're going to find out. Now, one of the first things I'm going to want to do with this empty saber is figure out where my holes are going to go on this end. Of course, this is the 8/32 threaded hole where the cover tech goes, so that goes against your belt. So on my saber, I'm right-handed, so I want to have the kill key where I can get at it with my left hand. So I'm going to want to put the kill key somewhere around here, a little bit offset of the cover tech clip. I'm also going to attempt to drill a hole for where I'm going to put my bar graph. So what I want to do is I want to mask this off. I'm going to use just some basic masking tape. Masking tape is great for when you're drilling holes and using a Dremel. Keeping in mind that when the pommel's screwed on, I want to be able to have room to get at my recharge port. So I don't want the recharge port too close to the pommel. I also don't want it too far out this way because it's not going to leave enough room for the soundboard. So I use a little caliper for just basic measurements. So I'm gonna put my recharge port in this saber about, let's go about 5/8 of an inch. I'm going to use a Sharpie, one of my favorite tools. I also want to mark off where my PLI is going to go, and so I can see the LEDs showing visibly where it's going to go. And obviously I've got a cover tech clip. It's a good size, so I want to make sure that I'm not interfering with the cover tech clip. So I want to move this ahead, but I want it in line with the cover tech clip. I want it on the same exactly lined up with that hole. So I'm going to draw an exact line with that hole in a minute, but just eyeballing it, I want to put this from the opening from right about here. No, my marker's not working. To right about there. Okay, I've drawn my straight line in line with that hole. I've adjusted the markings. I've made bigger ones that are a little more accurate to where I want the PLI to go. And so what I want to do now is I want to use a center punch, and I want to line these things up so that I can. I'm going to get a hammer here. You want to mark where your hole's going to go exactly, and the drill will drill right where you put the hole. It keeps the drill from walking over the surface of the aluminum. So I've got a couple of holes there. You don't have to hit it very hard. Aluminum's a pretty soft metal. And now I have 3 little punches exactly where I want those holes to go. So I'm going to drill pilot holes with the smaller drill bit and then the full-size ones in a moment. So now I've got my holes drilled. Obviously you can see for the bar graph there. Now I don't have a milling machine, so I do it the old-fashioned way, drilling 2 holes and then dremeling out. I've filed all the edges so they're nice and smooth and show really nicely, nice and clean here. But on the inside of the Saber, it's a different story. There's jagged metal pieces, and before you put any electronics in there, you want to take a piece of sandpaper, and you want to just, sometimes a little moisture on your finger to make it stick to your finger, and then you just rub around so you make sure that the inside of the metal where the holes you drilled and cut are nice and clean. Now the Ascend Sabers don't come with a LED engine, which is what I'm going to be putting into this upgrade. So if you pull out your LED module, it'll look something like this. Now there is an RGB LED in this one. There's a common positive, which is the long red wire. Then there's a red wire for the negative on the red die, a green wire for the negative on the green die, and a blue wire for a negative on the blue die. And yours, depending on what color you ordered, may have resistors on various ones of these. Always one left open if it's a color combination like a purple or an orange. So you can use this color combination LED and you can learn whatever resistor you need to in order to run that to a Petit Crouton to keep the same color of the LED, but also add the extra unused die as a flash-on clash die. Depending on your battery solution, you will need to use a heavier resistor because it's just one die. So what I'm going to do is if you take that apart and you pop the LED carefully off the heatsink, because it's adhered there with a heat transfer tape. It's two-sided tape. I'm going to get new heat transfer tape, and I'm going to wire up this LED. I'm going to plop it on that heatsink. I'm going to reassemble it for a LED engine. Now if you're relatively new to building Sabers or upgrading Sabers, I would not recommend trying this with the LED engine. This is a RGBA, because what you need to do is you need to bridge the solder pads in order to make the I guess it's the green and the amber work in series. That's the purple and the yellow wire I have here. And the red and the blue work in series, which is the red and the black wire that I have here. And you need to bridge these pads, so it gets really tricky. If you're going to need to do that, you need to have a good high heat soldering station. So if you have just what came with your Ascend Saber and you want to work with that to start with, that's great, because the Ascend Saber is upgradable, which also means it's re-upgradable. Start simple, learn your way around, get a little bit more advanced the next time. Now if you're changing out the LED and not going with what was in there, you're going to notice that the heatsink will have a hole drilled in it that matches up with this hole for the old LED. It slightly changes depending on what LED you're putting in there. So now that I'm putting a LED engine in there, I've popped it all together with the LED and the lens in order to measure where that hole's going to come out. And if the hole's in the wrong place, I turn, so I've got a nice bare space of copper through that hole. There's 2 holes. One of them is threaded for 632, a 632 set screw. So I'm going to press this all nicely together. I'm going to mark where that goes, and I'm going to take it all apart, and I'm going to drill into the heatsink. Now that I haven't put things permanently in there, haven't used the tape yet, so I take it all apart, and now I've got a marking. Where is it? Oh, very faintly you can see it, black marker. So I'm going to drill a hole there so that my set screw locks this in place in the correct position. Now the hole doesn't need to be all that deep, about 1/16 of an inch, and that's all it is, because the set screw screws through that hole, and it just needs somewhere to go so it's not sticking out, so that this whole thing can slide into the Saber. So all you're doing is giving it a little room by drilling a hole into the copper so that the set screw can lock that in, and you'll get a nicely locked together optical unit. Now if you took your optical unit apart, you might be wondering, what in the world is this little black washer? Well, when you put these all together, there's no real give in those. Those are a pretty tight fit. So what I like to do is take these little washers, stretch them out a little bit, place that over the dome of your LED, and then when you assemble the whole thing, you line those up so that it creates a little bit of a rubber barrier. So when this whole unit, and I slide my finger through in order to keep tension on the lens, when the whole unit comes together, I also want to be mindful of where my hole's going to line up. And when I slide that all together, carefully, because it's a bit of a tight fit sometimes, what will happen is my holes line up, my set screw can go through there, and there's also no wiggle in this when it's all squeezed together. Now you may find that now that the rubber thing's in there, these don't line up exactly, but if you squeeze really tight, they do. That's good. And you put your set screw through there, and that will hold it all together, and there's very little vibration is going to make that come loose. It's going to stay solid for a long time, which is one of the reasons why the Ascend Saber is built to last. Okay, for the auxiliary switch, this is the switch I have from Custom Saber Shop. There's actually another one that I wanted to get, but I failed to get it in time for this video. It looks like it's the same kind of base as this, but it has a kind of a metal-looking shiny dome. I think that one would probably work perfectly for this upgrade, but I don't have one. So what I've done is this needs to be 3/16 in length from the base of the switch to the top. Of course, you can see it's much longer than 3/16. So what I'm going to do is I've marked where I'm going to cut it off, and I'm actually going to do it this way. And what I'm going to do is I've got a little block of wood here, so I can line it up, and it's nice and level there. I can make a nice even cut with a knife, and now that switch is perfect. I may want to file off the top of that so it's nice and clean. Now you can see what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend these legs off, and I really only need to use two of them. So I'm going to squeeze the two together a little bit that I'm going to use so that they're in a better position, and I don't need them to be that long. So I'm going to snip them off at about 1/16 length each. I don't know if you can see that. The other two I'm going to snip off entirely, and I'm going to heat up the hot glue gun, and I'm going to file those nubs down because I don't need those, and I'm going to put hot glue dabs over each of them so that they don't short circuit. I've got my wires attached, and I forgot to mention in the opener that you need heat shrink. I didn't list that. I like to have different sizes and different colors around. I used white. You want to cut it really tight and close. It'll become obvious later when we seat the switch into the Saber. You don't want a long strand of heat shrink sticking out there. It's not going to fit. And you may not be able to see in the video, but I've got a couple of dabs of hot glue just on these corners where the old nubs were of the, you can just see them there, the old contact legs that we don't need, just so they don't short circuit. You could put a piece of electrical tape underneath, but I like the hot glue. Sometimes it's good to do both. Now, as you can see, I've got my my auxiliary switch prepared. Of course, my slide switch main was prepared from before, and I've got my LED engine all wired in with the mains and the flash on clash die set up. So I'm going to move those out of the way. Here's one thing you want to do. In each Ascend Saber there is a, where is it now? Here, plastic sleeve. Well, this plastic sleeve protects against short circuits, and it slides in enough that when you upgrade, your speaker holder slides in and doesn't interfere. So what we want to do is this is going to act as a window for our PLI, so I want to rotate it around while it's in there and find a nice spot because it can get scratched. And I'm going to take a Sharpie, when it's in there, I'm going to do two things. Number one, I'm going to mark off where our PLI is going to go, and number two, without moving it, I'm going to mark off where our recharge port's going to go. Now you don't need to worry about the hole where the CoverTech clip's going to go, because that piece of shielding in there is actually nice to keep the CoverTech screw from interfering with any of the inner workings. Acts as a bit of a barrier. Now what I'm going to do is slide this out, and I can see where my PLI needs to go, and I can see where my recharge port needs to go. I'm going to take a Dremel, and I'm going to clean out this area so that the recharge port can slide through. As you can see, I've lined up my PLI inside my sleeve. Now I lined it up with the Sharpie mark that I had put on there, and then once I had glue gunned in both ends here and run the wires the way I wanted, then I took some methyl hydrate on a rag and I wiped off the Sharpie. So now I have my PLI exactly where it's going to need to go. I'm going to keep the wires loose until it's time for the assembly, and then I'm going to attach those to my Petit Crouton. This is the first time we're going to use the 3M two-sided tape. I've put a tiny little square on top of the processor for the Petit Crouton, and I've wired up my power extender. And I figured out that where the SD card is, that's towards the speaker of the Saber, and of course this is towards the front of the Saber. And my wires for the LED for the flash and clash are going to be towards the front of the Saber. So I'm going to mount this right on there. Now again, if you are just doing a basic upgrade and you're not using the power extender, just ignore this part. I want to be careful where I place this so I don't interfere with anything. That's about right. So I'm going to squish that on there really good, and it sticks out a bit, but that actually works really well. It's going to stay on there. Now I'm going to cut these wires to length, solder them to their appropriate parts. The yellow is the flash on clash wire, which will go to that little guy right there. And yeah, and then I'll proceed with wiring up the rest of the Petit Crouton. Here's a trick when you're wiring the recharge port. I cut off the leads from the recharge port, make them a little shorter because they don't need to be super long. And then what I do is I get heat shrink, about 1/4 of an inch long, and I cut it at a slant. So when the wire's attached, I slide the heat shrink on. The slant means that it covers a little bit further down. Okay, so I've got my my battery and my Petit Crouton wired to the recharge port. I used a strip of the 3M tape to hold the Petit Crouton onto the battery, just at the point where the SD card holder butts up against the battery there. I'm going to put a zap strap on there at the right place to hold it on even more securely once I get the switch wires attached, but not quite yet. I've got the KK connector of blue wires to my speaker, and of course the red wire goes to the pin on the recharge port, and then the same connector goes to the positive on the board. Black wire goes to the recharge negative, and the other negative, the white wire, goes to Petit Crouton. You can see those are the same red and white corresponding wires that also go to the power extender. But enough about wiring. Now the next thing we're going to want to do is start getting the Saber reassembled. Now before I do, I'm going to teach you a little trick that helps make the Saber even more durable. What I like to use is a little bit of tacky putty. It stays tacky. You could use almost anything as long as it doesn't dry into a hard substance and can be cleaned off. And what I do is I put it on the end of an Allen key, and just inside the Saber body, making sure it's clean, I just dab that in so it stays. There, I got the putty to stick in the inside of the body of the Saber there. You can probably almost see it. A little tiny dab of putty right there. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to get my switches. I'm going to run them through their holes. I've got the switches run through their holes. A slide switch, white wires, auxiliary switch, gray wires, and I've got the LED switch wires all run through the Saber body. So I want to line this up. You can see the milled grooves line up with the switches. It's part of how the Saber was engineered. So I want to gently push the module down towards, I want to push the module down towards there. And when it starts getting close, I'll look and realize, oh, it's no longer lined up. So I use an Allen key and I move the module around, are matched, and you'll see. Because then you won't pinch the wires. You don't want to pinch the wires. So you want to gently begin to push your switches into their proper position. Oh, come on, do what I want. And when you've got your switches in their proper position, so that they're not going to get pinched, you can start to slide back. Sometimes you need to use needle nose pliers to pull this back out just gently. There you go. Now I can feel my switch module sliding back in there, and it's not pinching the wires. Everything's going nicely, and it's lined up. And I'll know even further. I can push back until I see that hole up here there. Now you may remember from when you took apart the Saber that hole corresponds to that set screw. Taking your 5/64 Allen key, of course this is a new one. The only reason it's got this big yellow tag on it is because I wanted to remember what size it was for the video. and you insert it in that hole and you get it. Oops. It's also harder to use when you've got the tag still on it. So I'm going to use one that doesn't have the tag still on it. That's the one I always use. So now this will go through the Saber body, threaded, and through the optics module hole, and thus locking the optics module inside the Saber. Now, the little piece of putty we put in there keeps it from rattling around in there. It's not coming out regardless. The putty is just a shock absorber to keep it from making any sound and keep it solid. So now that that optics module is in there, we want to make sure that our switches are seated, fitting in there nice, so not making any short circuits. The slide switch fits in there, and it's a floating side switch. What actually holds that in there, and this is the next thing, is this collar. Slide that over all the wires hanging out, tail end of the Saber here, and gently, without scratching, slide that over the Saber body, over the slide switch, over your auxiliary switch, which you wouldn't be able to get access to because you have to press it with something, so we'll have a little cap that'll go over that. But the reason you need to make the auxiliary switch a little bit shorter is so that the collar slides over it, doesn't get caught. So when the collar's in place, now we find our little set screw in there through this hole, and you want to essentially back it out. Now, why am I not finding that? Because I'm using the wrong set screw. That's why. I'm using the wrong Allen key. You want to back that out until, in other words, counterclockwise, until it makes contact with the collar. Now the collar is held in there really tight. Your slide switch operates, and your auxiliary switch will operate well once we have the plunger on there. Now, this is the part you've all been waiting for, because you've been wondering since the beginning, what in the world is that hose for? Well, the battery with the Petit Crouton in it is going to slide into the Saber, and it doesn't slide all the way, so there's nothing holding it in at this end. It's loose. And we don't want any vibration, we don't want this rattling around the Saber, we don't want this sliding back and forth. So what we're going to do is I'm going to cut a 1.5 inch length of this pipe, of this tube, and I'm going to slide it in around the wires ahead of the battery. So it acts as a rubber bushing holding the battery in place. Okay, now there's my 1.5 inch length of rubber pipe. Now I'm going to cut a slice all the way down, and the reason is, I'm going to be able to open that up. So now our wires. Now we want it to go around some wires, and we want some wires to go over it. The switch wires, we don't want those to go through this, we want those to go over the surface. So the gray and the white wires, I'll hold those out of the way. These wires here, I'll just drop them through the slit that I made. So the wires to the LED are inside, and the wires to the switches, button and switches, are outside. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work this all the way, gently, past the point where the bore on the inside of the Saber changes. I'm going to use my trusty screwdriver gently to do this, and I'm going to get that all the way so it butts up against the end of the heatsink of the LED module. So inside the Saber, so the hose is butting up against the heatsink like that, acting as a bushing between the heatsink and the battery. Next thing we want to do before we start attaching all these wires to the Petit Crouton is just gather them up together. They don't have to be twisted together like some people will do, and we may want to do that later. And you want to start to slide this shield, slide the wires through the shield, and begin to run that into the Saber, approximately how it's going to go. Keep all your wires clear, and you'll see when you get in there, because the PLI meter will line up, the hole that you made for the recharge port will line up. You can just leave it in there now. I could even pull it out a little bit, because we're going to need to use those wires to the PLI. We're going to need to connect those to the Petit Crouton. So now we know everything kind of fits. We're going to cut our wires to length. This is an important tip when you're cutting the length of your wires. Now with the wires to the PLI, they don't matter as much because the PLI is on the sleeve that's going to slide, but the rest of these wires are anchored to the objects that they're connected to. So you want to have them long enough so that when you attach them to the Petit Crouton, you actually still have enough room to be able to swing your battery end in. If these wires are too short when you attach them, there's no way to get your battery in without disconnecting something up here, disconnecting something there. So you want to make sure you have enough room to be able to do that. Now each of them are going to be cut now to length to wherever the little spot is they need to go on the Petit Crouton, and I'll show you a creative thing that we're going to do in a few minutes with the slack. Okay, as you can see, I've got everything wired up now. The PLI, which is here, is now wired to the bottom of the power posts for the Petit Crouton. That's the wire running there. And of course I've got my sleeve now with the PLI anchored to it over the Petit Crouton and the hole where the recharge port that's going to go there. And of course I've got my wires zap strapped here and here, so I can make an S curve with them. So now as the Saber is assembled and as everything gets slid in together, the S has to go inside the plastic sleeve. Those wires now can slide together without bunching up. Sometimes what I like to do is I like to use an Allen key to kind of act as a hook and to pull them out. With this kind of Saber, this kind of design, it's kind of tricky to do, so I'll just make the S curve and then just start to slide it in, and the rest, the wires will do the work themselves. I want to see where my PLI is going to line up. I keep pushing it in until it lines up, and if it's not lining up, I turn it a little bit. Should be able to see, there it is, and then push in that direction. That's going to tell me where my recharge port's going to go. This is one of the trickier parts of the Saber because you just have to get everything patiently in place. And if you do your work making everything the right length and all that jazz, it will line up, and if it doesn't, it tells you that there's a wire pinched or in the way or something like that, so you just pull it out and do it again. It'll take me a while to get this all lined up and ready, and the next thing I'll do is put my recharge port in. It's important to try a test, which I've already done but I haven't done for the video. SD card is in, everything's in lined up. Before I put my recharge port in, I want to hook up the speaker. Of course the kill key is still in, so there's no power to the Saber yet. Now again, I've tested this out to make sure that this works before I try, but switch is off, kill key out, you hear the boot sound, see the power level indicator go up, Saber fires up, put the kill key back in for now, and we're going to get the recharge port set. Now in order to do that, I'm also going to use this hose to act as a buffer between the other end of the battery, which you can see probably, let me get some light, you might be able to see the end of the battery right down in there, between that and the recharge port. So now I need 3/8. So I'm going to measure off 3/8 of hose, and then I'm going to insert that. Now, this is a 3/8 inch long section of hose. That's going to go in here underneath the Petit Crouton. So as you can see, I've got it together. It was really tricky to get everything to fit. I had to put that on one side of the battery, and then the S curve and the wires on the other side of the battery. But if you're patient, you can make it work. It's not like I wouldn't do this again. In fact, I may do another one exactly like this, because I like the PLI. It's kind of cool. It tells you the battery level as the battery drains. It gets closer and changes color, so it's down here and it's red. As you can see, I've got everything's locked in there. That 3/8 length of hose, I don't know if you can tell, is squished in between the recharge port and the battery, so everything's nice and solid in there. The battery and the Petit Crouton are not coming out, and all the wires are run neatly. One thing I didn't mention is with these wires that go to the switch ends, because these are going to get pushed in and out a lot, I would put a couple of dabs of hot glue on there to keep it as a stress relief so these wires don't break off of the board. We plug the, you can't really see what I'm doing. You plug the speaker in there. Now you have to very gently run these wires and this connector so they don't get squished, and so they don't accidentally touch the end of the SD card and pop it out. That's how you change the SD card, by the way. The access is through there. The speaker pops in. You can see it seats in there nicely. Nothing's caught. Of course, the pommel that you have has probably got a center piece in there. You can punch out the spring using the needle nose pliers. I showed that in the disassembly video. And you can get a different end MHS pommel insert that has speaker holes in it. This one is, of course, my Genesis Custom Sabers one. You can get different ones from the Custom Saber shop. You can pop it in there and it holds in with the spring. But we're not going to bother with that right now. I'm just going to put the pommel on. It's in there. Speaker's not turning. That's great. Recharge key is out. Light is on. Saber is working. So we want to finish off the the auxiliary switch, because it's just the top of the switch that we installed in there. I like these. These I got at Home Depot. They're basically just red rubber. You can get them in black too. Rubber ends to go over screws, so that the screws don't catch on clothing or whatever for whatever your application is. So I snip off the end of one of those, just over 1/8 of an inch long, and it's basically just a red rubber cap. And inside the red rubber cap I put a dab of that tacky putty that doesn't dry. It's a weather stripping putty. You could use some kind of temporary glue or just almost any adhesive or putty. You might not even need to use anything because it fits in here really perfectly. And it goes over the top of the cap of the switch. You press down to get it nicely seated in here. And you can feel the switch action as you press. So pull the kill, Saber boots up, fire it up. You've got your auxiliary button. As you can see, I'm all done. I've got powder coated with the carbonate color, machined away to expose the bare metal, and I've got a purple powder coating in here, machined away to expose the metal. Usually I don't do two different types of powder coating in one body. It's a little bit complicated, but I did it for this one because it's an exceptional Saber. I've got a machined custom kill key, and when I pull it out, you'll see the PLI. It's my Bestman sound font, purple blade with a flash-on clash. As you can see, I changed out the button cap to be a black rubber screw protector that I got at Home Depot. Works really well. Very happy with how this turned out, and it'll be going up on eBay soon. Also important to mention that I will be doing, sometime in the near future, the next couple of months, I'll be doing a series of more basic tutorial videos on how to build your own lightsaber, covering everything from selection of parts to tools, weathering techniques, wiring techniques. I'm going to start putting those together and offer them as a membership on my website. So you want to watch my website and watch me on Twitter and Facebook for news of that development coming up soon. Again, thanks for watching. Hope this has been helpful.